Hello again, everyone. I talked in the last video about reconstructing Saturday Draft 1 Pod 3 at Pro Tour New York 98. And I want to talk about Pod 5 today because I was able to put this one all back together again as well. I guess I should add, if you didn't see on Twitter, that there was some ambiguity at the end of the last video about who played whom in round 8. There were like 2 matches that I didn't have sorted out. And as it turned out, I was able to figure it out based on tiebreakers. So part of what's going to happen in this video is tiebreakers as well. And I thought this would be a good chance to show exactly what the process is for using tiebreakers to tell people apart. Okay, so here's our setup. We're looking at pod 5. This pod, everyone comes in on 15 points from the previous day. And the thing that got my attention out of this is that there was a 27, and then there's also 2 24s. So someone goes 4-0 in this pod, but 2 people also go 3-1. And if you think about it, that's a little bit unusual. And we're going to have to try to figure out how the pairings could allow for that once we reach round 11. But first, we should start the way we started previously. Let's hope that we're going to be able to fill in a bunch of names. And to that end, we'll start by putting in some wins and losses. So I just got done saying Sigurd is evidently going to win every round. So we'll put all W's here. Mark Justice is famous enough that he showed up in all 4 of these rounds. So he came in at 15 match points. In round 8, he's mentioned as being at 6-2, so he must have won. Then in round 9, he's mentioned as also being at 18 points. I think this is a typo. I think Mike meant 6-3 here. So win, then loss. Then here's Justice at 21. And here's Justice at 24. So his path through this draft is win, loss, win, win. Now, I also got Planeswalker point information generously donated from John Chinnick, Andre Constancer, and Terry Sang. So I'll fill in their information as well. John goes loss, win, win, win. And we knew a couple of his opponents based on the stuff that was in the DCI database history. Constancer goes loss, win, loss, win. Whoop. And Terry goes win, win, loss, loss. And you'll notice of the 3 that I have information for, the only name, okay, so there's this match with Escland, which I'll come back to in a second. I was able to fill that in ahead of time because I knew some information about how the pairings would work. But the only name that I actually have is Andrew Corney. So Andrew's out there somewhere. Thank you for having logged in. That's a big help. It would be nice if I could find you because I don't know what you did in the last couple of rounds. Maybe there will be some names in your Planeswalker point history. But the fact that you showed up in the other 3 people is what's going to make what is about to happen possible. Okay, now let's look at round 11 real quick. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 wins. So there needs to be 1, 2, 3, 4 losses. Similarly, over here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 wins. So there need to be 1, 2, 3, 4 losses. And that's, I guess, about all we can do. We know there's a win and a loss here, but we don't know who is who. And there's 1 win and 2 losses left to be distributed among these. I guess one other thing that I should say, if you're looking at what we're about to do, is that filling in all these names appears to be impossible from what's on the screen right now, because both Dale Taylor and Brad Swan have 0 information. We don't know any of their opponents. We don't know how many points they have at the end of this pod. They seem to be completely interchangeable. There's some symmetry in the input data that we have, so there should be also some symmetry in the output data that we have. I'll try to convince you that there's some way to tell them apart in a little bit, but at the moment it doesn't appear like that's the case. That difference is going to show up in second pod information. So the fact that Brad played Greg Weiss at the very end is important. You can see that they don't finish on the same number of match points. The way they appear in the final top 64 tells me that Dale should end up on 27 and Brad should end up on 24. Now, let's talk about the pairings. So I already filled in one thing that we knew, namely that Escalind and Sang must have played each other because those are the 2 people who were win-win. And the way it works is that the 2 O's would play each other in round 3. So I had already deduced that based on the pattern of wins and losses. But we'll see that that match is going to have some implications. There's also a loss-loss pairing, right? Andrew Corney should play the person who starts LL, but we don't know who that is. It's either Dale or Brad, so damn. There's one more thing I should add before we get down to the nitty-gritty, which involves looking at the total number of match points of everyone involved in this pod. When we start, everyone is on 15, and 15 times 8 is 120. In each round, there are 4 matches. Those 4 matches involve 4 winners and 4 losers, so 12 points will be generated. 12 times 4 is 48. 48 plus the 120 we have is 168. Let's see how those wind up getting distributed on the other side of the pod. The 5 people that I already understand wind up with 117 total. So if I just put in the minimum possible for everyone else, which is 15, like maybe they all lose all their matches, that's not actually the way it would go, but just so I get some sense as to what I'm working with, we're already at 162. So that means there's only 6 points left to distribute. That could either be distributed all to one person, and then it would be 21, 15, 15, or it could be distributed to 2 different people, like this, like 3 at a time, and that would give this distribution of records. The first thing I said is crazy, and you probably realized that ahead of time. We can't have 2 different people going 0 and 4 in the pod because they have to play each other as the loss-loss match in round 3. So this is out, and instead we must have 2 18s and a 15. The next thing I want to point out is that exactly the way I've written it right now is not possible, because if we scroll forward, we see that Dale Taylor winds up at 27, and he's not going to get to 27 unless he starts at 18. He can go 18 and then win, but if he has 15, he'll never get there. So this needs to be 18, and we don't know what's going on with the other 2, with Brad and Andrew. So I'm going to write 18 or 15, and the other one is 15 or 18. Okay, now let's think through all the pairings. So we started with 8 15s. That will produce 4 winners, which have 18 points, and 4 losers, which have 15 points. Then the 18s play off and create 2 21 winners and 2 18 losers. And the 15s play off, and that produces 2 18 winners and 2 15 losers. So then the 21s play and produce a 24. The 18s play and produce 2 21s. The 21-21 loser is also a 21. The 18 losers are 18s, and then the 15s play and make an 18 and a 15. So this is the distribution of match points coming into round 11. The logical way to pair this last round would be straight down the line. So 24 gets paired down to 21, then there's a 21-21 match, then there's an 18-18 match, and then there's an 18-15 pair down at the bottom. But this is not what happens. And I can tell you that this is not what happens because this can't produce a 27 and 2 24s. This would produce, at best, a 27 and 1 24. So I think there's 2 ways to overcome this, but these pairings are not correct. One option is that 24 plays 21, and that the other 2 21s can't play each other. And if that happens, then we would have redistribution like this, where the 21s are like forced apart and they get paired down to 18s. But I don't think that this is what happens, and it's because of what we're asking from the top matchup. We're asking the 24 to beat a 21. If we look at who's 21 and lost, that's only Terry Sang. He's the only person who ends this pod on 21 points and lost in the last round. So the only way to get this configuration as written would be for Sigurd Eskelin to play Terry Sang in round 11. However, Sigurd Eskelin played Terry Sang in round 10. So they can't play each other again, and that kind of ruins this whole picture. So this system of pairing everyone does not work. So let's go back to the way it was previously, and we'll come up with some other way that we might be able to pair them. I think the other option that I've got is that we could switch these 2. So maybe the thing is that the 24 doesn't play any of the 21s, and he gets paired all the way down to the 18, and then that produces this combination of pair downs. Then we would have a winner from this match, a winner from this match, and a winner from this match, all producing the 27 and the 2 24s. What would cause this to happen? It must be that the 24 had played all the 21s already. That's the way that we could make this turn out the way we want it to. And if that's the case, then we can fill in what Sigurd did in the previous 2 rounds. He must have played Justice and Chinook. And since Justice only has a loss here, I mean, Sigurd wins all of his matches, so this must be Sigurd over Justice Mark, and this must be Sigurd over Chinook John. Now, I don't know who the pair down is here, but there's a 21-21 match, and that's going to produce a 24 winner and a 21 loser. We said the only 21 loser is Terry, so he lost that match. And then the 24 winner isn't Chinook because we know he got paired against Andrew Corney. So that has to go here. This is Sang Terry. And this is Justice. That's progress. But I think this is about as far as we can get as it currently stands. And again, the reason is that we can't tell Taylor and Swan apart. So I could fill in like the different branches that we have to try to choose between. There's a win and a loss that we haven't accounted for yet here. So I don't know. They may play each other, they may not. But one of them won and one of them lost. The person who lost will play someone who lost in round 8. Well, it could be Constanza, except we already know who he played. It could be Corney, except we already know his opponent. So it has to be Chinook. So Chinook plays the Taylor-Swan loser, whichever one that is. And maybe I'll be a little bit clearer about it and say the person who lost in round 8. That means that Terry plays the other one. So this is the Taylor-Swan R8 winner. The person who lost will be 0-2, and we said they have to play the other 0-2, which is Andrew Corney. So we can put here that this person plays the Taylor-Swan R8 loser, and the other person must be Mark Justice's opponent. So this is the Taylor-Swan R8 winner. And our choices are either that they play Justice and lose, or they play Corney and win. Well, I didn't explain why they win yet, but I'll add that in 1 second. The fact that they have to win comes from Brad Swan's information. So we know Brad Swan plays Greg Weiss out here in round 14, and that puts him in what I called Pod C. I don't have a number for it yet. Greg entered Pod C on 18 points, and so in order for Brad to come into that pod with Greg, he needs also to be on 18 points. So he needs to be the person who goes 1-3, and Andrew is the unfortunate 0-4 from this draft. So now I think it looks like this, and we're again kind of stuck. But there's one thing here that isn't symmetric, and that's Mark Justice. So Mark Justice has to play the Taylor-Swan winner, but he doesn't necessarily have to play the Taylor-Swan loser back in R8. In round 8, he might play against Constanza. And with the thin hope that that's what he does, let's go check out his tiebreakers. The catch is that if we are going to look at Mark Justice's tiebreakers, we're actually going to need to look at them after round 12. So I have some tiebreaker information after round 10, but Mark Justice isn't among the top 16, so he's not there. I also have some tiebreaker information after round 12, and here it is. I have final standings tiebreakers for the top 8 as well, and Mark Justice makes top 8, so we're going to use that in a bit. But I want to focus on this 61-67 number in a moment. The catch is that I need to know what happened in round 12 for all of my potential opponents. So we're trying to decide whether or not he played Constanza, Taylor, or Swan. Now I have Planeswalker point information for Constanza, and I know that he won round 12. So he is at 24 match points at this point. Taylor has to go win, so he's at 21 match points. Brad Swan started at 18 and ends at 24, so he could go win-loss-win, or he could go loss-win-win, and we're not even sure. So he's either on 18 or 21, and we're going to have to try to account for the fact that it could be either when we look at his contribution to Mark Justice's tiebreakers. So with all that said, I think we're ready to look at the tiebreakers. So here we go.
So if you're unfamiliar with how tiebreakers work, here's the quick crash course. Your first tiebreaker, which is the one that I'm using, is the average of the percentage of match points that each of your opponents has earned. So this is after round 12. There are going to be 12 terms in Justice's average. One term will come from each of his 12 opponents, which I've written down. Note that I don't know who he plays in round 8, and I don't know who he plays in round 10. In round 10, he plays against the Swan-Taylor winner, whichever of those two it was. But he might play the Swan-Taylor loser in round 8, or he might play against Andre Constancer. So we're hopefully going to be able to use tiebreakers to figure that out. In order to do that, I need to know what everyone's contribution is. So give me 1 second, and I'll write that all in. Okay, so here we go. I've got them all written in. I left the round 8 and the round 10 contributions as just like an X and a Y because we're not sure exactly how many match points each of these people had. For these others, for instance, this is Masato Nakamura. He did not make day 2, so he played 7 rounds and went 3 and 4. That means that the percentage of match points, or the fraction of match points that he earned, was 9 out of 21 possible. These first 3 opponents didn't make day 2. Everyone else did, and I'm very, very lucky that I was able to figure out how far everyone had gotten in the tournament as of round 12. Bill Macy gave me his Planeswalker point information. That's the only reason why I have this number. Otherwise, I think we would be stuck. We would have to try to figure it out. That would be a confounding variable. I left open 3 options for what X and Y might be. We know Constancer is on 24, and we also know that Dale Taylor is at 21 after round 12. We don't know if Brad Swan is actually on 18 or if he's on 21. Brad could be in either of these 2 places. So the 18s may not even happen. We're not sure, but they have to be a possibility in the calculations. So let's see if we can figure out whether or not Justice played against Constancer based on this grid of information. So the way I'm going to do that is by going to Wolfram Alpha. I'm just going to type in, I want the average of these things to come out as 0.6167, and we'll see what we get. All right, as promised, I've put in 1 over 12 for the average of 12 things, and then the sum of all those fractions equaling 6167. And then it simplifies it, and if we come down and look at what it comes up with, it says y equals 44.9858 minus x. Now, I rounded, the 6167 is rounded off to 4 decimal places, so the fact that we don't get like exactly 45 doesn't really concern me. This is telling me that 45 is the correct number of points for x plus y. So now let's go back to the thing that we had, the list of the opponents, and see how we get x plus y to equal 45. X plus y equaling 45 requires a 24 and a 21. That's the only way to do it. The largest I could get otherwise would be 21 plus 21, which is only 42. So that means that I can be certain that from this tiebreaker, it only works out if he played against Constancer in round 8. Now let's take that information and head back to the spreadsheet.
Okay, so the result of that tiebreaker information is that Mark Justice beat Andre Constancer in round 8. And that means that Dale Taylor and Brad Swan must have played each other, though we don't know the outcome of that match. I think this is what we've got from that little bit of information, that 0.6167. If we got in touch with either Brad or Dale, and actually think that there's a chance I might be able to get Brad Swan's Planeswalker point data, which would be nice. Just knowing whether or not their round 8 result was a win or a loss would tell us which track each person was on. So there's some hope that we'll be able to separate them based on that information. Having said that, I don't think that we're done yet, because we also have Mark Justice's round 14 tiebreaker. It's 61.22. However, to use Mark Justice's round 14 tiebreaker, we're going to need to include his other opponents. So we only got up to round 12 before, and you'll notice there's a gaping hole here. So let's examine that. So we're ultimately interested in this pod 5, but I am going to bring the whole sheet back up for a second, and we're going to switch over to Mark Justice's final pod, which was pod number 2. So clear all, and let's just look at 2 like this. So here's what we can see. Mark Justice and Nate Clark came into this pod on 24. They both won, and then they drew their round 13 match. I don't know if this was an ID. I'm guessing it wasn't. That would be a bold ID if that's what they did, because they still needed to win the last round in order to make the top 8. We know that Mark won this round, and I can fill in some wins and losses that apparently got deleted. He has to win over someone else to make top 8, and the choices are Feng Chan, who's at 30 at the end of the tournament, or one of Gary and Bingen. And I don't know which one it would be if it's one of these two, but at least I can say that the contribution of that person would be 27. So we have a question about whether or not it's Taylor or Swan back here in round 8, and we know Taylor's a 27 and Swan is a 24. And then we have a question about like Chan versus Gary / Bingen. That's a question of 30 versus 27. So with all that said, now let's look at the full tiebreaker for Mark Justice and see if we can do a similar sort of game like what we just played in order to figure out what combination of results would produce 61.22.
Here we are again, ready to look at Justice's round 14 tiebreakers, end of Swiss. We have all of the opponents. I got to copy and paste the first 12, they didn't change, and then I added the last 2. And remember, we have ambiguity in round 10 and in round 14. So I'll now add in all of the match point percentages, and we'll see what we can do with it. Okay, here we go. So you'll notice that the denominators have now, well, these 3 are still 21. Those people didn't make day 2, so they were done after round 7. But all the other ones became 42, 14 times 3. Instead of 36, which we were looking at earlier, which was 12 times 3. So the ambiguity is between Swan and Taylor. Swan finishes at 24, and Taylor finishes at 27. So Brad, Swan, Dale, Taylor. And then we don't know what happens down here. He either plays against Justin Gary or Sturla Bingen, who finish at 27, or he played Feng Chan, who finishes at 30. Let's load this all into Wolfram Alpha and see what we get. I have loaded it all into Wolfram Alpha, and now let's take a look. So 1 over 14 times the sum of all of these fractions. You'll notice the x fraction and the y fraction there. And his tiebreaker to 4 decimal places was 0.6122. When we look down at what it tells us, it's that x plus y should equal 56.97, or approximately 57, right? So again, 6122 is rounded. I'm not surprised that we don't get an exact answer, but 56.97 is saying 57 to me. So now let's go back and look and know that x plus y is 57. So if x plus y is 57, how many ways are there that that could happen? The only option is this one. How convenient. So he must play Dale Taylor in round 10, and he plays Feng Chan in round 14. I think that we're going to be able to make some progress now if we go back and look at the spreadsheets. Let's do that. Okay, let us finish up here. So we kind of accidentally were able to learn that Mark Justice plays against Feng Chan in his win-in in round 14. But that's not the point of this video. The title of this video has to do with Pod 5, Backman Draft 3. So let's go take a look at that, armed with this extra information that Justice actually must play Dale Taylor. So we said this must be Taylor, and we know that this is the winner of the Taylor-Swan match. So I can come over here and say that Swan lost and that Dale won. Now we know that Chinnock plays the loser. The loser was Swan. So this one is Chinnock. And we know that Terry played the winner. That was Taylor. We've already filled in that Mark played against Dale. So now we're going to fill in that Dale played against Mark. And finally, this is the person who plays Andrew I warned some of you on Twitter that this is as far as we can get, and this is unfortunately as far as we can get. So there's hope in that we have Sigurd Eskelin's round 12 tiebreaker. But what I learned from Sigurd Eskelin's round 12 tiebreaker is that this missing person has to have 21 match points, and it's possible that that's either of them. We can't tell. The good news is that if we do get Brad Swan's Planeswalker point information, we're actually going to be able to figure it out. And the reason for that is because Andre Constancer is live in the system, and Sigurd Eskelin is not. So I know when I get Brad's information that round 11 will be a loss. But the question is whether it will be a loss against the named Andre Constancer or against a blank opponent. And if the opponent's name is blank, it must actually be Sigurd Eskelin. So that's, I guess, kind of uplifting news. Unfortunately, tiebreakers only got us this far. But if you look at how much purple we were able to fill in, I would say that the tiebreakers still got us quite far. This is as far as we're going to get for today. Thank you all for watching. More soon, I hope.